Very, very exciting lineup for you this morning. And I'm not going to talk too much about Terrence because I think he will be the one that can say more about himself than I can. But I can promise you, if I say words like entrepreneurship, if I say something like mentorship, if I say something about excellence in teaching and learning, if I say something about passionate about what he's doing, I think those are the kinds of words that, to me, gives a bit of a summary to Terrence. A young man that are really going to rock the boat. The request from my side is, yeah, we can sit here and listen statically, but I really want you to challenge him. I want you to, if he says something, challenge him on that, because that's what we did last night at dinner, and that is the things that he thrives on. So let's make it an interactive session. Let's talk to each other. Let's not have a one-way thing. I don't think Terrence said he's not here to come and talk to you. He wants to engage. And as CEO and director of companies, that's the kind of thing he wants. He really wants to be challenged. He likes to challenge you, and I want you to buckle up, because we're in for a rough ride. Thank you very much, Terrence. Over to you.
Colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be with you this morning, and I thank you for being here. Just hoping the heavy guys keep up with me. Whilst I say my formal greetings, I'm sure many of you have seen different forms of these kind of letters. At these conferences or presenting papers, there's different forms of how things get rejected and accepted. I'm Terrence Kommal. But before we get into my background, I think what's really important for me is, thanks to Prof. Herman and Prof. Babs, with some of our discussions last night, I just want to take you back a year or two, actually almost more than 2 years, in an experience that I had, and I want to take you back on that journey of where it started, because I think it's highly relevant and it was really pertinent over dinner last night when we spoke about it. So if we go back to April 2016, I was called by colleagues in the healthcare industries, because I'd started many startups, so no doubt a lot of them failed, and some of them succeeded. But through those processes, you actually learn what works, what doesn't, and what were initially entrepreneurship ventures became family businesses became entities got acquired by larger entities, and then I started to move on to different positions and different work, and still have many entrepreneurship ventures going on at this point. But during that time, colleagues in the healthcare industry, and particularly what they call the expert services, so the medical legal consulting space. I'm just going to quickly flick through that slide as a formal introduction. I just like that picture because it's the jacket, I tell you. And the rest of it, apparently, I did a lot of stuff before I got married, but we'll skip through that. Okay, but I think if we go back to the story, go back with me to 2016 April, when colleagues said, Terrence, you are an expert, in inverted commas, in what you do. We want you to actually help fix the system. I won't mention the state entity, but you can draw your inferences of what it is. We need you to bring your experience to this. And I said, well, cool, you've nominated me for a couple of things. The ministers have their own agendas. So let's see what happens. My good luck, or as God would have it, I don't know if that was good luck or bad luck, around August or so, a colleague had called me around the local elections, which we all know was very, very contentious at that point. And he said, let's come over, we've got friends coming up. Fine, I'm ex-military, I'm a military veteran. He said, just military people. I said, no politicians. He said, Terrence, no politicians. So you drive into this driveway, this fancy estate out in Mooikloof, you go down this driveway, and some of the estates almost as big as this campus, and you drive in there and you park, and as you get to the driveway, you see flashing blue lights. I'm like, oh God, what did I do? Protection cars. So there's clearly some VIPs in that venue. Got in and I said, listen, what's going on? He said, just some friends. I said, okay, just some friends. And eventually Minister Peters, the Minister of Transport, was at the venue. We're talking 20, 25 people in a closed room affair. Got chatting, and I was actually quite amazed how up to speed she was, because you do the formalities. Typically you give a minister a card, she gives it a PA, nobody looks at it again and done, but you have to give one anyway. And she looked at my card, she said, this looks interesting. Tell me more about what you do. Wow. So I told her the kind of work we did, the kind of industries we worked in. By that point, our companies had done assessment for them to the valuation in excess of probably about 2 billion rand, protected the state against claims for almost about 80% of those. So valid claims went through, the frivolous ones were blocked, or we weren't in support of those claims. And she said, Terrence, I'd like you to bring this experience. Are you able to help me? Now, let's be honest. Minister makes a request, not a request. She's telling you what to do. I said, of course, Minister. But luckily at that point, in parallel to that process, I was also already unbundling our corporate entity because it was an 8-month process, so we were already moving on, shareholding, etc. had been sold. So by the point she requested, it wasn't a huge difference to me, and I said, fine. If I can get to the firing line, we can do something. We can try and make a difference. And she said, Terrence, the problem with my board is they only write policies. They don't know what happens on the ground. And if you can bring your expertise of what you do on the ground to the board, it can make a huge difference. I said, wow. But she said, run the process. Let's see what my team thinks. So I got to the department, they did the interviews, the whole biometrics, almost like you're going for a new license of firearm application, the whole criminal workup, because they send you to the state security agency, do all your processes. They invite you to the interview and then tell you, well, if you don't agree to security vetting, we can't interview you. Well, again, you don't have a choice. So you run the process and you say, guys, more than happy to do it. It was probably one of the shortest interviews in my life, about 14 minutes. So either I really impressed them or really wasted their time and my time. They asked me about some context, some policies, some legislation. One guy looked excited. I said, oh, really nice, let's see what happens. They walked me down and that was the end of the conversation. In October, late October, I got a call from a lady, let's not mention the name, you'll know where it's from, and she says, Doc, are you so-and-so? I said, yes. She said, I need an appointment, we need to meet on Thursday, 10 o'clock. I said, listen, that's not how it works. I've got people that run my offices, call them, they'll sort out your appointment. And she said, no, you're coming to us on Thursday. I said, you've probably got me mixed up. I don't go to people, you come to us. We've got a medical center going. She says, no. Thursday, the meeting. I said, can we break this down? Let me give you the number. So she disconnects the call, she calls me back. I said, but Doc, I'm so-and-so from this institution. I said, I know, I heard that the first time. She says, but I'm inviting you to the board meeting. I said, for what? She said, you're now a board member. I said, since when? She said, last Friday. Okay. So I pitched for the meeting on a Thursday. Fantastic. What was really great for me is one of my colleagues who I at that point respected very much in industry. I'm a doctor, he was a doctor. I did postgraduate studies in business, so did he. I did health policy, he did health policy. He's leading businesses as a doctor, I was doing the same, except he was 20 years older. So got to the board introductory meeting, he was the chairman of the board, and I said, nice to meet you. Meeting goes on, you sort of weighing your place up, because you can run entities that run into millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. But when you walk into a boardroom where you're accountable for tens of billions, it's a very, very different conversation. And even better, when those tens of billions belong to more than 57 million shareholders. It's a very interesting dynamic. And that's the time exactly when state capture started to come to the fore. Not that capture happened then, capture happened long ago. At the end of the introductory meeting, I told the chairman, and I went to him and I said, Dr. So-and-so, I'm absolutely in awe with the work you've done. You're appointed for the 3rd time on this board. You've got fantastic experience. I've been watching your career for the last 5 or 6 years. Been watching your LinkedIn, your profiles, your social media, and things you're doing, as you do to anybody that you would have idolized in that space who did what you did. And I was shocked with his response. He says, what are you looking at me for? He says, stop watching my career and do what you're here to do. It's the first time I've had someone that I paid a compliment who says, leave me alone. I said, okay, and I let it be. Little did I know, because during that introductory meeting, he said, but we're going to go to the minister and say we're missing 2 people on the board, an actuary let's say an actuary and an IT guy. And he says, we don't have those 2 people, so I'm going to the minister. And being the new guy, we all said, yeah, cool. Because there were only 3 or 4 new board members, the rest was his old team. And when we got to that point, we agreed. The next Monday, I figured what this is all about. He calls me the next Monday and says, Terrence, you're still conflicted, so I want you off my board today. I said, excuse me? He said, you're going to get off this board as soon as I can get you off. I told the minister last Friday. I said, that's not what we authorized you to do. He said, you don't understand. This is my 8th year as chairman, the 3rd term. This is my show. You're going to leave. And I said, well, okay, we'll see. Ran the process, spoke to the minister's advisors, but fast forward the story very quickly. The chairman had run his own unlawful investigation. He had used the institution's resources, gone into all of my own entities, all of the work we had done for them, knowing fully well that you didn't need to ask me if I had worked for my former company. Google would have told you that. Just put my name in and you see the pictures next to the logo next to my picture and my picture next to the logo. You'll see the interviews, you'll see the content, you'll see it on my LinkedIn profile. Nothing was concealed. But I resigned on the day of my appointment. He didn't want that. But he's focused, typically like you find in a lot of the SOEs, they will find a gap, get at you and keep you so busy because they have another agenda on the other side. And that became such a frustrating process. We discovered it in the first formal board meeting because I blocked a 220 million tender deviation for the third time of your money for a tender that wasn't a tender, it was a sole source procurement. And I said, but you can't deviate what wasn't formally done, and you can't deviate because you had 3 years to get this right. He said, who are you? I said, I'm that guy that has a reputation behind this, and I'm not going to allow it. And that's when I figured, this is how it's going to go down. We reached April somewhere, and the day before the Freedom Day, 26th, he mentioned in passing to the board, guys, I've completed an investigation against Terrence Kommal. The investigation is complete. The findings are made. You'll get a mail. Like, you and who? No, it's not for discussion. We've discussed this. The Chairco agreed, and I'll tell you about his really nice Chairco thing. And he then makes the decision, and I told the vice chair over lunch, listen, I'm actually overseas from tomorrow morning. I'm on a plane to London. And he says, don't worry, we'll deal with it. That night, he apparently had sent a mail. The next week, my office had picked it up and sent it to my attorneys. He had decided he's going to form a special board meeting. He had a meeting notice that, in other words, was an 11-page charge sheet with a comprehensive investigation done with a range of allegations that were not based on fact, in which he says, you are guilty. And he trusted his board so much, he even drafted the resolution waiting for his signature. You'll be removed and suspended from my board. On an appointment that the minister made through cabinet. I said, okay, let it go. I got back into the country, my attorneys briefed him, lots of correspondence back and forth. In summary, the matter ended up at the Pretoria High Court. The courts agreed with him. His behavior, according to the Honourable Court, said was tantamount to interference with the domain of the minister, and was an interference with governance. It was almost like if you charge someone criminally, you want to now do the investigation yourself. But all of this, again, was not about me. Because the morning that he wanted me removed was the morning of the next board meeting. And the next board meeting, which is now public domain information, so I can tell you about it, had a sole source contract to SAP software for 125 million rand. Sole source, no tender, unsolicited contract for 125 million of your funds that they wanted to sign. And he knew if I remained on that board, it would be blocked. It effectively was. To date, that institution runs without valid contracts. To date, they spend your money unlawfully. And here's the best part. They still get clean audits. I'll get into the detail of how that happens. It's quite an entertaining space when you spend time in the SOA space. But the reality is, if you look at this, this is exactly the perspective of the kind of leadership that I had served under for an extended period. It's not about doing the right thing. We didn't do anything illegal. They were so innovative. If the law didn't work, he'd write a policy, contrary to the law. And he says we're doing it in terms of policy. The policy says we can do this. It's almost as good as Bob Ross saying the Law Society said so, but he was the chairman of the Law Society when he said he could do it. That is what we deal with today. They created an internal process to pay claims that they don't use in the court process. They said because it's cost efficient. I have legal opinions from that institution in which the legal opinion says we do not respect the legislation in this matter. The legislation is flawed. We follow the Constitution, section 195 or 19 something of the Constitution, cost-effective management. It's the only institution I've ever seen who was willing to put that in writing to say we disrespect the legislation that we founded on. And this is where we find ourselves. So colleagues, a very good morning, and it was a phenomenal time that we shared with Prof. Ahmed yesterday, but I think I wanted to share that experience with you to give you a context of where we are in terms of governance and what we're dealing with in the country. The reality is, when we talk academics and information and leadership, let's keep in mind that every person that follows you is not your friend. They're not your friend. And in my case, my dear old chairperson quite found that out. I wasn't intending to be this, but let's just say that it's highly appropriate. Because what it did result in is he eventually challenged the minister. He actually made me feel, he actually massaged my ego so well, it was fantastic. Because he eventually told the minister and he told Parliament that Dr. Kommal is being protected by the minister, the department, the staff, the legal people, and all 18,000 people that work there. And only he is right. Only the chairman's right, everyone else in government was wrong, including the ministry and the SSA and the SAP. I actually felt quite good because it looked like, it sounded like a political club that didn't exist. It was really nice. But it did result in his board being dissolved and him being barred from being reappointed again to that entity. Colleagues, in terms of competencies, when you do leadership in ethical leadership and governance, we all know the institutes of directors in South Africa, which has put out a competency framework of what you should be competent at to lead institutions. And when they talk about these competencies, it's not just boards, it's not just companies, it's not PTYs, it's not SOEs, it's your institutions also. Any governing body, as it's called. So whether it's a church fund, or a temple fund, or a non-profit, or a soccer association, these are the guidelines that you should be working along. And the focus of this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, is to make sure that you can contribute to a board, lead a company effectively or institution, act within the law, clearly. Oh, sorry, my chairman was a chartered director, which means he's a top 90 considered governance experts in the country. He had no idea what that meant. But then you have to contribute meaningfully and effectively to strategies of institutions and organizations that you lead, work in an ethical environment and ethical perspective, work on the various committees. I'm not going to go into the detail. Assurance providers will do a lot more detail. Interrogate financial statements, which I think we're all well aware of, is being dealt with by the state capture hearings at the moment. Compliance management, stakeholders. I think this is critical. There was a different perspective when we were at that board, and I think some colleagues here may share my sentiments. When people talk about stakeholders, who are the stakeholders? In an academic setting like this, where you have esteemed leaders of education, there's an old idiom, they say if a policeman makes a mistake, someone gets away. Doctor makes a mistake, someone dies. A teacher makes a mistake and you can destroy generations. So your stakeholders in the education space is the entire country. Not just that student. Not just that learner, whether remotely, directly or indirectly, that's learning from you, but that entire generation of influence. I can be testament to that. I grew up with a father as a teacher, then a school principal, and now he's involved in senior management and education. I know what it's like. But the challenge you find is that dedication of the quality of teaching is directly proportional to what comes out. If that dedication is there, you'll find the quality. There must be a willingness to do more. That willingness to do more is not for yourself, but for the future generations of this country and our global economy and the people around the world. If you go into a lot of these quick ones, I'm just going to go to respond to business challenges, integrated reporting. How many of you actually work at your institutions with annual reports? Nobody's seen the annual reports of any institution? Copies lying at the dean's office? VC's office? The model has changed from annual reports to integrated reporting because the social, ethical, and governance aspects need to be brought in. What is the impact of our broader stakeholders? Because a stakeholder is not only somebody who directly has a material interest in shareholding in your business, or stay but people who may be impacted directly and indirectly by what you do. And that's the consideration you need to have. If you go into a lot of the other business challenges, we have a lot of those business challenges in this country. Is staying off the only one? The correct answer is no. Are there more than 10? Yes. At that scale, probably bigger. There are massive concerns in governance at this point in this country, not just in this country, internationally. It is a matter of us being acutely aware and learning from the experiences of what goes wrong with those boards. Self-knowledge, self-management, which I think you all know well as experts, adapt to the environments and interact with colleagues. I'm not going to go too much into that. But a challenge I want to put out to you today as colleagues is the Institute of Directors the only thought leader in South Africa on governance? Are they the only group of people with an office in Sandton that can put out thought leadership and governance? Is the King Committee, which is a self-constituted committee of a voluntary organization, the only group of people that can tell you how governance should be done? Because they brought down their competencies from 70 odd to now 17. And then you've got the other self-assessments. They make the rules. Where's the data behind it? Where's the logic behind it? Because I'll give you an easy anecdote. I was at London Business School last year for a program. And we were sitting in a class actually with our esteemed colleagues that we all may know well, Professor John Mullins, who's one of the phenomenal experts on entrepreneurship and business. And we sat there, and I was in a group of, I'm in an organization called YPO, so it's a group of senior CEOs internationally, 100, 120 people in a room. And they spoke of governance and what they're going to do and the focus. And being the clever guy from Africa, I said, but sorry, what about the governance implications of what decision you're making here? And I said, governance, what governance? I said, in terms of King 4. They said, dude, we have a queen. I'm like, but don't you know King 4? Because when you're in South Africa, they tell you King 4 is applied around the world. They got a queen, I tell you, because they had no idea what King 4 was. And I said, but guys, what about these stakeholders and these ethical and social governance issues? It's like, listen, buddy, we're here to make money. Let's not complicate this. That's the perspective I got out of it. One of the top 5 institutions in the world. It wasn't the lecture, please. It wasn't Professor John Mullins, but it was colleagues. He said, but the focus is on what we can make. The conversation then obviously changed at a later stage over coffees, and guys like, oh, that's what you mean, but they call it different things around the world. But that's important to me because in an information age where things move at a blistering speed, is this the only reference point we have? Because there was an interview yesterday, if I saw yesterday. I think it was Professor Don from Henley that put out the interview that Professor Mervyn King, who's now retiring from the committee, had an interview on SABC and those kind of things. Is there one process? Because in a room of leading academics like this, I would shudder to think if we agreed that there was just one process. Because I think there should be more, and we'll get into a lot more detail of that. This is the kind of things I dealt with. When you had governance issues that came to the board, if there's no more questions, he would move on. Because my former chairman, and it's a very interesting thing, is he created a subcommittee that became a super committee. So if ever you see it in the future, please, say Terrence said, don't allow it. He created what they call a chair of chairs committee. Here's the logic of this. The only company that said it's a fantastic practice was an auditing firm, and guess what their name was? KPMG. KPMG said a chair of chairs committee is very useful for effective management of the board. They also agreed that the delegation of the sole contact with the shareholder belonged to the chairs committee, who delegated it again to the chairperson. The chair of chairs committee had no notice, it had no agenda, it had no minutes. And it took place exactly 60 minutes before the board meeting took place, and it was constituted of the following. The board had 10 voting members. It constituted the chair, the vice chair, and the other 4 subcommittee chairs. A 60% vote caucus committee before the board met. Today, this kind of practice happens today. You'll find it in annual reports that are yet to come out this year. You're going to find it in institutions that manage your issues. Because the impact of that won't be felt on their balance sheet. It's going to be felt on your bank balance. It's going to be felt on your kids' education fees. It's going to be felt on where this country goes if we don't actually speak up and do something about it. In terms of the overarching principle, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, very simply put, Professor Mervyn King said, governance is about making more accessible, the King 4 is about making governance more accessible, and a catalyst to shift from a compliance-based, good governance-based, for value creation. A lot of what I want to focus on today is value creation. Compliance means tick box. The old rules of King 4, which the experts in the room will say, used to be comply or explain. Today they don't comply, nor do they explain. Ask the SASA people who got the judgment against them yesterday. At the Concord, again, in which they're held liable for the cost. And they will go back again, and still not comply, and still not explain. Because they do what they want with impunity as long as we keep quiet. Board capture in South Africa and the fiduciary duties of directors. I've actually put out podcasts on this, I've put out content on this, I've put out videos on this, because I can tell you firsthand what happens behind those curtains of saying the confidentiality of state institutions. Colleagues, I think that's absolute rubbish. Forgive my words, but there should never be a phrase of confidentiality of boards of state institutions. Because those state institutions are run and overseen by public representatives. In terms of the Public Finance Management Act, it says we must govern ethically and transparently. How do you govern transparently when you seal the information and decision-making process behind a board charter? And then say it's confidential, it's privileged. How can it be privileged? It's not your money. It never was. Well, at some point it becomes yours when you steal it. Yeah. But it could never be yours lawfully, because those resources don't belong to you. And I worked in environments where the direct beneficiaries were some of the most impaired, maimed, and harmed individuals in the country, in a worse off situation than SASA itself. But it was the only state institution in which they had to sell nothing. Zero. There was no focus on income. You keep filling up, they keep getting money. Ironically, it got worse. And if you talk about claim to fame, that chairman's tenure in his 8 or 9 years, I don't think he finished the 9, he got to about 8. When he took over that board, they had a 42 million contingent liability. His glory showed it to 200 billion 8 years later. Your funds, your delays, 200 billion contingent liability today is very close to 20% of the national budget annually. It's always going to get together and call in those claims. Forget Eskom, forget Trillion, forget Gupta's. This is looting at a scale like you won't believe. Please don't forget it, because that looting is also not good. But the biggest issue we struggle with at this point is the decay of morality, greed, and short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. And I'm going to skim through some of these slides, colleagues, because I've got so much to share with you, and I'm hoping it is important. But I see Prof. Badge is going to give me a look and say, Terrence, time. So I'm just going to move on to this. But colleagues, important, auditors. One profession that we all believed is unquestionable. I, for many years, and I've put in a lot of my podcasts and discussion papers, is we all have this perception when the auditors come in, they look at everything, right? When you get a clean audit, it's clean. Absolute nonsense. They do a sample. And I'm sure a lot of the domain experts here would agree with me. That sample can be manipulated. So if I tell them this is the records, they'll only take a piece of this. But I don't tell them that's the rest of the records sitting in the basement that we haven't told you about, and it's off books. Which is exactly what they do. They sample what they told. And I'm not sure if many of you are aware, but that institution, the AG says, I don't trust you. Because they had some challenges, which we're all aware of. That one very recently they said, we don't like you either. But their reason that they stayed longer is their claim to fame is we were an empowerment auditing house. Therefore you can't act against us because it'll go against BE scores of the AG. Eventually the AG says, I'm done with you. But let me give you a little bit of context of how these companies work. The board I sat on had policies and processes approved by KPMG. I fought it. I insisted we get alternative opinions. We finally got Deloitte in with a learned colleague who was from their team. They asked me to make submissions, and they were very nice. He comes and says, Dr. Kommal, you can detail all of your concerns to them. You got half an hour. You got half an hour. I said, okay. I said, can I make all my submissions in half an hour? She said, yes. I was clever enough to put it on an email. So I documented a 10,000 word document. It took me 30 seconds to hand it over. She says, you've got to share what you shared with them, with us. I said, no. It's auditor-client privilege. No, but you can't do that. I said, you claim the same confidentiality, right? And that's exactly what I did. 10,000 word submission of exactly what is being done and how it's being done and where the failures are. This focus wasn't on an independent audit, it was on the governance, on the board charter. Because the chairman created a charter that was superior to the legislation. He gave himself powers that wasn't there. He even went to court and said, ignore what the act says, the charter says this. Guess what? He wrote the charter. To run your money in your country. This lovely firm, I was privileged to work with two of their very well-known colleagues. The vice chairman of the board was the SME partner of Nkonki. The head of audit of the board was the audit partner for Nkonki, who had owned 5% shareholding of Nkonki on a declared document. Black and white. And then when the Gupta associated lieutenants bought shareholding in Nkonki, they said, we didn't know it transferred. How does he buy 100% controlling stake if you didn't sell? From auditors. Isn't it true when you normally want to find out what's going on in your company, you go to the auditors and say, sort these share certificates out for us? You were the auditors and you don't know your shares were bought. No, you knew. You knew very well what was going on. Who else did they audit? Both these firms. Because I know I went to board meetings and they had express access. They were the representatives, and I'm sure a lot of you know, but I'm going to mention it for completeness. They didn't do work just for the AG. They went to institutions as the AG. The AG didn't have capacity. So when Mr. X from Nkonki walked in, he walked in with a flag on his pocket saying AG. KPMG did exactly the same thing. They were the AG. They also audited Parliament. So if you want to look at state capture, don't look at just the institutions. Look at the entire process of where it's involved. But then if we start moving on to other things and say, is there really such a thing as a clean audit? But in my view, there's a big difference between clean audit and clean governance. Clean audits are, very simply put, you know how to hide your stuff long enough to keep it hidden. I sat in a board meeting on the 30th of May this year with the AG's representative present and these two people from the other company. And the AG says, you tentatively have a clean audit. They said that this grocery list of Procurement tenders, deviations, requests, tender extensions, tender deviations, no tender, we're going to spend the money, we're going to tell Treasury that we have a problem, we can't get it done, and we need to spend the money anyway. One contract, 200 million rand. Repeated extensions for rentals, 10 years, you can't get one tender done. 10 years for building rentals. And the AD says, it wasn't in our sample. I said, good, I just changed your sample. I actually had volunteered, and I told Prof. Herman about it last night. They said, but Dr. Kommal, if you do that right now, it's going to cost the institution 50,000 rand that he didn't budget for a 200 million contract. 50,000 rand more to do at the order to get. And I looked at the company secretary and said, when last did I invoice you? She said, Dr. Kommal, your invoices are 4 months overdue. I said, good. Take 50,000 rand from my director's dues, pay for it, get the order done. They were furious. Because 20 minutes later, the head of the audit committee says, you know, we were going to get a clean audit if Dr. Kommal didn't open his mouth. And I'm thinking, well, hold on. I'm not the auditor in the room. But if I can see from my level of experience of business, then we've got a problem, because the auditor knew what he was doing. He was hiding those transactions. Because why did they do it? They make a living moving like leeches from board to board to board, not for directed use, but to maximize the short-term benefits that we pay the bills for. We all know how this window dressing thing works, right? He looked really cool, then not so cool. And I think he's about to look something like that in front of Parliament quite soon. But was Steinhoff the only one that was doing it? I can tell you now factually with information I have at hand. There are multiple institutions. Simple. All you need to do is look at the top 40 or the top 100 shares on the JSE and ask who's on a massive acquisition growth that's unjustifiable. Or what Investec told me when they refused to bank me the first time. Your exponential growth is unjustifiable. A first-year banker can tell you that. You can't have money that you didn't make to buy companies that you don't need with an income that they don't have. And there's a lot of those companies listed today that the PIC has invested your pension into. Yeah, when I say pensions, then some people start looking up. Because that is the reality. The impact of what they do is not just their shares. It's your money, it's your future, and the rest of our economy that's tied to it. But something that I hope I have enough time, but I'm going to skim through this very, very quickly, is the role of academia in governance, thought leadership, auditing, tax, and business. How is academia perceived? At the moment, lots of silence, which to me is ominous, and we need to change that. In terms of information, and that is why we're at a research conference, and I'm going to say things slightly different to what the focus is not all people who consume information are academics or enrolled in programs. That is why we have books on systems thinking made easy. Finance for normal people. Sustainable leadership and leadership made easy. They want it for normal people. The focus is, and this I think would be the crux of the questions I'm going to ask now and we need to ask at the end. Why are we in academia? If you go home today, you see your wife and kids, you sit with a family and you ask yourself, what is my end game? What is my purpose in what I do? Publishing? Papers? Journals? Professorships? Titles? Emeritus? Then what? Why are you in it? And that's a question you've got to ask yourself, because I can give you answers from what I do. But the issue is, why are you there? What would you discover if you had a terminal illness tomorrow? You've got yourself a year to live. Will making sure you pay another $5,000 to get another 500 papers published make a difference to your life? Will it make a difference to your legacy? What will you be remembered for? If you were to leave this earth on a given day and you knew about it, how would that change your perspective? What is your legacy? What do you leave behind that people say, that is the difference you made? I know in one of my battles, at least I beat the chairman. And I'm changing policy because the litigation goes on. We are now moving from declaratory application to declare the processes followed cannot be used by any other state institution. And, unlike Zuma, I'm fitting my own bill. In excess of R1 million already. But if we don't stand up to take the fight and stop what's going on, no one will. A lot of colleagues have asked me, but Terrence, you're taking money off your family's table. As if I don't, they'll take money off your table. Because that's exactly what they're doing. We had a conversation about this on Tuesday when we had a presentation with my learned colleague, Yuva Naidu, at the Harvard Center for African Studies. In one perspective, the director of that institution has said, people are in academia to create knowledge, increase tenure, increase keynote invitations, and research funding. It sounded quite interesting to me, and hearing it from people from Harvard kind of makes sense. When is knowledge knowledge? Knowledge, in my view, is knowledge when it is acknowledged. Isn't that why we publish? We want external validation. Because if your research was really, really making you happy, why do you need to publish? It is important, please. I'm not doubting publishing for publishing's sake. But the reality is, why is there a need for the external validation, or what we call with our learned peers here, peer review? You want someone to validate you, right? But the economy and the perspective of industry has changed, whether it be in the healthcare space, whether it be in the education space, any other space. It's changed from B2B, or business to business and business to consumer. It's now moved human to human, person to person. Because the reality is, try and explain what you do to your child and tell them, here's my paper, read the journal, oh sorry, you don't have university access. We curate our lives every day. And when we do it every day ourselves, we make sure that we consume what we want the way we want. Some of our learned colleagues, including Prof. Herman, is currently curating and consuming content. He's on his phone. I just had to do that. But the reality is, we curate content in exactly what I'm saying. You do it anyway, and you consume it when you want to. And I can assure you, he's not behind a paywall looking at a journal right now. But how many of you exactly this are doing this? Look around, look at your colleagues. Who's consuming content from another medium? And are all those medium journals in front of you? From a university library? I would hope not. Some of the most referenced people internationally who create content today are created and referenced for their thought leadership, and they're not academics, they're not attached to institutions. Yet you follow them. Just yesterday we were talking to Prof. Babs, and he says, you know this article I read? You know the article could have been written by a 22-year-old from Business Insider. Because I spoke to some of their journalists. I think the guy by the name of James, 22, 23 years old. Phenomenal guy. How extensive is his experience on the subject matter he's writing? He may be a great journalist. But have you questioned the authenticity of the content? No. It appeared online or in print, so it must be true, right? To a room of academics who criticize everything else and say, is it valid? But we consume it anyway, and I don't have a problem we consume it. The reality is we consume it anyway. Because if you look at some of the greatest people internationally who lead some of the most powerful companies internationally, they didn't need to finish a formal education. Because last I checked, they control probably 80% of our time at the moment. First thing in the morning, Facebook. Some people LinkedIn, other people News24, other people other websites. But you consume information when you want it, in the way you want it. And the reality is, less exposed people will then consume it the way they want to. We had an interesting conversation yesterday with some of our colleagues on spirituality, expertise, and reach. To me, all of this is important. Because try and think for a moment, this peer review process. Who peer reviewed the Bible? Or the Gita, the Quran? We have this conference now, we publish papers, and we make sure there's a valid documented trail. Then you have a conference 300 years later after the passing of, or leaving of our beloved Christ, a conference of Constantine, and then we compile books together, and we form the Bible. And we say it's 100% accurate. I don't doubt the religious aspect. How academically valid is it? But we go to church every week. We respect the word the way it's written, but who wrote it? In 2,000 years, do you know the original authors? Did they do proper referencing? Was it plagiarism?
Was it plagiarism? Oh,
but the reality is, we trust things because we trust it because we want it. Whether it fits an academic model is wholly irrelevant. I had a huge fight with the University of Pretoria when I was still there doing my undergraduate many years ago. Because I did a paper on vibrational medicine and alternative therapies compared to mainstream medicine. And they said, Dr. Kommal, whatever you're saying doesn't exist in the medical world. We work on tangible science. I said, cool, let's go to the anatomy lab. The prof's like, cool, what's your point? I said, that cadaver has everything to be alive. Wake it up. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? It's dead. Like, what's the difference between a dead body and a live body? They have exactly the same components. In the medical world, they both should be moving. I said, cellular phones don't exist in the medical world. Because MRIs also don't exist. Imagine telling a medical professor 50 years ago, you're going to shake a couple of magnets and I can show you what's happening in your head. He'd say, I'd shake your head and see what's going on. Now MRIs are some of the most respected diagnostic modalities that we use. Things change, but the model doesn't change. Because in the medical world, I struggle. I actually had to contact the NIH because my alma mater was very proud of the association with the NIH and say, this is my paper, what do you think? They said, we love it, can we publish it? I took the same email to the professor who was marking my paper and said, now, you want to do it, he's going to do it. No, we'll have to relook at this thing. Because the reality was, in the medical world, a lot of what they believe, because I had challenged the professor to say, if you're not going to pass this paper, then stop going to church every Sunday, because the God you speak about doesn't exist medically. Then if it was a God, there is no medical God. Yet we all know in the healthcare space and every other profession, we're merely instruments of a divine force that controls what we do. We don't make those decisions. We do the best we can. Well, I hope someone first don't. But I believe in a higher calling, and I used to tell all my patients that, even when I practiced in anesthesia. Doc, how's it going to go? I don't know. You talk to him, because he's going to give you the same answer. We do the best we can. He decides the outcome. But trying to run through this very quickly. How many of you have heard of Gary Vee? Gary Vaynerchuk. Very, I see the academics love it. That's his current subscriber base on YouTube at the moment. Every time he puts out something, 1.5 million people in the world want to know about it. 1.5 million people. Talk about publishing, this man publishes every day. I know, I listen to him. He's on blogs, he's on podcasts, he's on videos, he's on content. Look at those viewing numbers when they start initially. And these are from really old content. I should have put on the latest one. But he's got content that exceeds millions of views per week. This is his viewership. 119 million, almost 120 million people influenced by one man and he's thinking around the world. And he writes the way he wants to because he wants to. And when our colleagues had told us we speak about speaking gigs in 10 years and traveling the world, and that is why we build our profiles with the content. Gary Vee is 42 years old, he's a self-made entrepreneur, Belarusian, he's an immigrant in his own words, to paraphrase what he says. His current speaking fee is between 75,000 to 200,000 US dollars. Almost 3 million rand per event. He did 3 last week when he traveled for Asia. I listened to all of those interviews. He said almost the same thing. And he was so nice, he says, he published a book, his original book was Crush It. So he was Crush It in the way you reach attention, and, because he speaks of an economy of attention. What are we doing? Whether you publish, whether you write, whether you do audio, we are buying attention. Finished. Whether it's Prof. Herman's on his phone, or somebody's on their laptop, and they're looking at something, it is taking your attention and time which you'll never get back, which is priceless. He says, if I can influence that attention for a moment in time, that's all I wanted. Then he wrote a few other books in between, and the latest one is called Crushing It. And he says, those who can't afford it, it costs $14 if you buy it from Amazon. But they take their fee and this fee and that fee, I get $4. Come on. You know what my speaking fee looks like? He says, I'll tell you where to download it from a torrent. Go get it for free. The intention is to share the information. Colleagues, this is where we are today. I printed that last night. 3,000 people want to know what the institution thinks. They've had 760,000 views since 2010. And just to show you the Gary Vee started his in 2007. So about 10, 11 years is of this kind of reach. Our institution, the entire institution, has this kind of reach. And just because I met some of our very esteemed colleagues from VUT yesterday, I looked at them. 229 people want to know what they think. They've had probably about 47,000 people listen. Because they're not putting out content. That's the challenge. In terms of the 4th Industrial Revolution, colleagues, I'm going to race through this with Prof. I apologize, I'm running a few minutes over. We're moving into an age where things are completely different. If you look at what we teach today, don't look at the orange. Where does your program fit in 1, 2, or 3? Because you're empowering institutions. You're creating employees. You're teaching them what to do for someone else. And you're telling them to do it yourself. You're not stimulating the thinking for independent thinking. You're stimulating to make sure they can work mass production, so they can get to the factories, to the environments, to the plumbing, to the teaching, to whatever the profession, even medicine's a mass production kind of thing today, if you look at what the medical aids do, some automated processing. This is where we are in terms of empowering. Scale efficiency. Things get faster. We must do things right. And things are now moving to doing the right thing. And this is from a governance perspective, it's from an ethics perspective, and it's a leadership perspective. The reality is, whether you follow up or not, it's going to go right past you. Because in today's conversation as we speak, it's past us already. And it's already going to continue going past us. Because in the digital age, you're going to automate a lot of these complex processes. I can tell you now, I can log into my Investec account and click travel document. I need to go to the United Kingdom, I need to go to Paris, I need to go here. I'm taking my 4 dependents with me, I want my home address, I want them to put the document, do I want it stamped, and no, I want it issued. 4 minutes later, I get a mail. Bank issued letter, valid, with signatures on it. I call my other bank, I won't make them feel bad. They say we'll mail it to you by the evening, because they're going to go type a document and print it. I was quite entertained. The other day, I'll mention it, it's actually Standard Bank. They had sent me a letter saying they want to confirm my account. I still have an account in Tonga, where I grew up, in Durban. In 2005, I left there 18 years ago. They say the account was opened in 2005, it belongs to this portfolio, that person, that branch code, but my account now actually resides in Rosebank. The bank couldn't get the information together. But there are other institutions that can get the information effectively and efficiently available. The reality is, we've got to ask ourselves, where are we in this space? Prof, apologies. I quickly Googled you. On Scholar, very particular search. 953 listings. Phenomenal wealth of information. Phenomenal wealth of information. This is what we find when we want to read what he said. Get a paywall. In a continent which is below the breadline, in a world that struggles with basics of food and sanitation and water, we take the best information and lock it up. Who actually really owns that content? Aren't we somehow funded by the taxpayers? That researchers, students contribute, rights of ownership, and then we take the ownership and give it to an institution. How much has really changed? Because in the old days when I grew up, the rich kids had Britannica. The less rich kids had Childcraft. People like us visited them to go read it. Because you had the best products, you had Childcraft. Because that's where knowledge ended. If it wasn't in the Childcraft, it wasn't in the encyclopedia, it never happened. We're talking days before Wikipedia. Knowledge ended there. But how much has actually changed? Because where is the best knowledge going? It's getting locked into resources that nobody can access. If you really want to get past it, people are getting frustrated. If you're looking for the correct domain name, hint it, that one currently works. You can get any paper from any researcher at no cost today, because the global movement has said, we're tired of paying for what isn't yours. And we will read it and share it. But what about the alternatives? If colleagues say, but we have to publish in an academic model, in an academic framework, with a particular referencing style that has every date, every person, every name, and every time we say his name, we can reference it. One of the most powerful journals globally, the Harvard Business Review, that I read regularly. And I'm sure many of you do anyway. But it's written for normal people. People like me. They don't want a bracket of it every time you say someone's name. They want to read the information because it's powerful. Will you publish in formal journals? Yes, you can and should. But this is also a formal publication, one of the best business publications in the world, with cutting-edge thinking of where we are. But it's accessible. Not very accessible to every person on the street, but it's reasonably accessible. You don't have to go behind a paywall. You don't have to go to a university library that paid millions to get access to a journal that you gave your research to. There are more than 300% more mobile phones in Africa than sanitation access, which is a fact. So if you want to reach our people today, let's not talk global, let's talk this continent. How are you going to reach that person? And it's a bit of a stereotype image, but the only one I could find that to this morning. But the reality is, this is what we deal with because I was in High Court on Tuesday. Now, just think about it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the guy taking the picture on their phone. How do you think they're consuming content? You think they're going to the Varsity website? They want to consume information the way they want it, when they want it, because they need it. And they're probably making life-changing decisions, whether for themselves, their fiancés, or their partners, or the trial that's about to happen, because this was done at about 10 to 10 in the morning, just before court 2A opened. A lot of people say, I stopped explaining myself when I realized other people only understand from their level of perception. How are you talking to the level of perception? Being some of the brightest minds in the world, how are you speaking to the level of perception? You know what their perception is because you research their perception also and put a paper out on it. You even know how they think and what their education is. And then you don't talk to them. And then we say we want to change Africa. Who's heard of Singularity University here? Seriously? It's actually not a university, imagine that. It costs $15,000, probably a little bit more at the moment, to attend the executive program on cutting-edge innovation and technology. Today at the NASA campus, you get to visit Apple for free. $15,000. It's about the same price as one of the MBAs in this country. For a week on innovation, by academics who work for some of the best institutions in the world, who will work for a non-profit university for cutting-edge technology because the mainstream universities are too regulated. Who goes there? Some of the best people around the world. I potentially may go later this year, if not early next year, but they've got sessions almost every month. They've got concurrent healthcare programs, tech programs, finance programs, fintech, health tech, you name the tech they've got. But cutting edge of where things are not going to be now, but in 2 years' time. Not 20 years, 2 years' time. and what's being implemented. In terms of online learning, and very quickly to try and round into this in the next few minutes, I'm a big fan of massive online open courses. South African institutions hate this. Not all of them, some of them. Because we've created, forgive the pun, these white castles of control and knowledge and power. Because I can tell you, when I went out to Mayo Clinic about 2 years back, I met this guy by the name, I think it was John. And we had a social, and we had a good time, we had a couple of drinks. I didn't know who he was, but just a really nice guy. The next day I found out he is the associate dean in charge of the whole Mayo campus in Scottsdale. On a first name basis. Easy, casual, and just exactly like the academics we have here today. But where I came from at the University of Pretoria and other institutions, Professor so-and-so first. And then I needed some things we had discussed, and I needed some papers and documents. He walked across the entire campus to come give it to me at the conference venue. Imagine that. Try and ask your dean to bring you a document in an article in a conference venue. Never gonna happen. So I walked out after him, being typical South African. Prof, thank you so much, thanks for making the time. Just seeing you, like, you're missing out on the bloody conference. I said, can we say thank you? He said, for what? I said, I'll give it to you, I gave it to you. I said, no, but it's respect. He said, of what? You're paying to be here, go into the course, we'll talk in the evening. And that was the perspective of saying, leave me alone, get the knowledge you want. And the only reason I ended up at Mayo Clinic is a lot of the healthcare discussions we had in South Africa, we use Mayo skills, Mayo thinking, Mayo content. I'm just going to mention a quick anecdote on that. When I was at Mayo Clinic, I went there because in South Africa they said, everything's from Mayo. The Glasgow scale, and this scale, and that scale, all these testings, including the psychology batteries. A lot of the stuff we use today in this country that the HPC has validated, accepted. They don't validate, they just accept it. And when I went to Mayo, and they said, and then I was privileged to get the opportunity under Dr. David Doddick and his team. He's one of the world leading authorities in mild concussive head injuries. He was on President Obama's panel, and he says, Terrence, you can do it. And you do an observership, so you watch what they do, and they did different test batteries in psychology. And I said, but guys, I came here to learn about the Mayo stuff that we practice there. And they said, which batteries? And I gave them the list. Very proud. They loved it. They said, dude, this belongs in a museum. We don't use it anymore. It's out of date even in the United States. So I came back, a very proud colleague, and I went to my colleagues in the academic space and said, why are we still using outdated stuff that the Americans don't use that they own? And I kept asking and asking and asking. Eventually I got an honest answer from one colleague. She said, Terrence, but don't quote me. Or I'll quote her anyway. She says, Terrence, you are asking the professors of psychology to declare that all their research is invalid. Everything that they are an authority on is now out of date. Who's going to agree with you? Because all of these test batteries belong to their designations. They are authorities on these topics. But if you tell me the authority of which they are on doesn't exist, they're not going to agree with you. And guess what? They sit on the council at the HPCSA. Fully well knowing the test batteries are out of date. We litigate on that every day. We spend in excess of 40 billion rand, I think, in the road accident fund, and a few tens of billions in the healthcare space, using the same test batteries that they're now completely invalid today. Tax money. In terms of online learning, very quickly, growth of online thinking, and I'm a huge fan of that, is making access to learning easier. Sharing focused content, as Prof. Herman had said yesterday, you want a quick sprint, you want to focus, and you want to get exactly what you need. And I'm a huge fan of that, and that is why I felt I wouldn't be offending too many people. At least one person agrees with me, for now at least. But the thinking is, if you look at online learning, numbers from last year, 81 million students across 800 institutions did access to 9,400 courses across the world. Coursera is the platform, international platform, 30 million learners, edX, which Harvard is on, and various other platforms. Very quickly, what are people studying? They're doing business, they're doing technology, they're doing actually everything. You want to doubt the credibility of the institutions offering the programs? I think not. Some of the best in the world are saying, come and take it in the format you want it, actually when you want it, on demand. So if you actually get education, what's really changed? We've got horsepower. You dress it up, you make it look sexy, and then you still run the old system. But let's be honest. In terms of expertise, if we were to stand here, if I were to claim I'm an expert, who knows I'm an expert? Who agrees with me? Because Bruce Lee had said, well, they say he said, we don't know the reference. I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. If you continually put out academic information in various topics, what are you the expert of? And has everyone else besides your peers validated that? Because if it's not been validated by your peers, I worry. Because in terms of normal capacity, this is an MRI of a very close friend of mine's wife. She's 100% functioning. Because a lot of people are going to say, but Terrence, there's clearly something wrong with you. There's a tennis ball size of her brain missing. She's 100% fine. The fact that something's missing doesn't mean you can't use the rest. Innovation, African innovation. Can it? Has it been done? Anybody heard of Get Smarter? People, you gotta take your phones out, man. They created a platform to access UCT's courses, Oxford courses, and MIT's courses. It sold for $100 million US 2 years ago. That's 1.4 billion rand. How many of our research teams at our institutions can do that? 8 years. 2 guys started it. 2 guys. Created platform, acquired by a US platform, currently still offering programs today. The Oxford FinTech program, globally, to access FinTech training from Oxford, #2 or #3 institution in the world. Only on Get Smarter. Very quickly, struggled with theories and prof. I apologize for the overstepping of the time. I had a challenge when I was doing one of my health law modules at this university out of a master's program a couple of years back. By that point, I was already actively practicing in the medical legal consulting space. I had an advocate who was the lecturer, the domain authority on law, who taught theoretical law. And every time she said, the law says this, I said, judgment X said that. Every time she says this, and I said, the court said that. She says, the law says this, and I said, the court said that. She said, get out of my bloody class because there's nothing to teach. But she then examined me on a paper in which I actually used, by just changing the names, to say, this is my submission. If I were to argue a case and provide evidence from the medical world using health law, she gave me 65%. The same document with the correct names was sent to court on litigation for a successful, in excess more than 5 million settlement. She thought I didn't know what I was doing. The senior counsels and the judge thought quite contrary. Another challenge that we sit with in terms of authority, I won't mention the institution because they've just called me to help them, make an input on the innovation and technology, just a little bit, not too far from here, on what they're doing with their conscience. I don't want to piss them off at this point. But the reality is we talk governance and leadership and ethical leadership. When you talk governance, academic was practice. The head of the course has a doctorate in theology. He is an expert in theology from 1971. Never sat on a board in his life except the ones he and his colleagues created. They even called it the All Africa what. I won't mention it, then you'll know what it is. They created an Africa network, started in South Africa. Guess what? All the members of South Africa. But it's called All Africa because it sounds a hell of a lot more important. When I went to a program with him that cost me in excess for 100,000 rand for spending 10 days and learning ethical governance and leadership, I said, but Prof, I deal with this. He said, Terrence, the theory says this. And I say I deal with this, and he says I deal with this. We kept going back and forth, and then eventually asked me, have you sat on a bloody real board? Forgive my words, but he says, yeah, these ones. I'm like, my current accountability is 45 billion rand for the taxpayer. Are we in the same even conversation? Terrence, we can't have this conversation. Because actually he didn't. The worry is he was considered the expert. He's even got a professorship in a title I didn't know could even exist. I'm not going to mention it, then you'll Google it quickly. But he's got a title that was manufactured. Something in society, something like that. And the worry to me was he's considered the domain expert. He was so upset when he saw my interviews that I had done for CNBC. He went to, it's one of these online newspapers, and got an article published. Because when I put up my video and said, hey colleagues, guess what? I got called up and they wanted some of my opinions. Fantastic, we had a few comments. Exactly a week later, you saw my article on this website. It was Business Live. And I didn't have the heart to tell him, right at the bottom of the article, it says, sponsored by XYZ. The institution bought an article so he could say he published in the space. Scary, eh? In terms of possibilities, very quickly, one of the old prolific colleagues that used to speak a lot in the public domain and criticize a lot of things happening in public was Professor Adam Habib. I'm not sure what Wits has done, but I don't hear much of him recently. He used to be very vocal, not very much more. The reality is, let's be honest, in terms of academia, is the only Professor Pierre de Vos who has an opinion publicly. Because constitutionally speaking, forgive the pun, but that's his website, he's the only one that makes input from the academic space. The opportunities are in front of us as we speak today. In terms of ethical leadership governance, and you can use this in any of the domains that you're subject experts in. Judge Zondo said on the 21st of August, I don't know much about procurement. Now wait, let me rewind this. He is the Deputy Chief Justice, heading the state capture investigation on procurement. And he tells you, I don't know much about procurement. I hope the journalist cited this properly. I didn't look for the video. I'm going to give him the credit saying he might be right. But there is something called amicus. Become a friend of the court. And I'm not saying go that far, but the opportunity lies there. share information with the court. If a matter is going on, an institution or an individual can go in and say, I want to share my expertise. This is what I know. Create a document, create a framework, create a paper on what Public Finance Management Act is about, or the Municipal Finance Management Act. Put it out and say, we're researching in the space, whether it be from the accounting team, whether it be from the governance team, it be from any of the other colleagues, or inter-institutional. We say, these three institutions got together. This is our opinion on the space. We think it might help you. Do they trust it? Yes. Because many times, including the Constitutional Court will say, but we found this in Snyman's textbook, or this textbook, or that textbook. Because when you ask the authorities, they respect you. The question is, do they have access to your information? Are you making it easily available? In my honest opinion, you need to make it available. You need to start creating podcasts. You need to start creating video content. You need to start repurposing what you do and reaching out to your consumers in the way they want to be reached, when they want to be reached. Because the reality is, you're doing it every day. You're on your phones, you're on your laptops, you're consuming content. Why aren't you creating content? And in terms of content, it doesn't have to be new content. Because sometimes people want to know the process. How many of you have watched those crazy videos where they put Mentos in Coke on YouTube? Or they put those funny things? You find odd stuff. Did you sit as an academic and say, what's the final outcome? Is it going to pop or not? No, but you're super entertained with the whole process. And they got this little GoPro going, and then they put the bottle there, then they got the Coke, and then they put it, and then they run away, and then it's a huge fun, and then they do different. It is purely for entertainment value, but you informed people the outcome. Document. These are not my words. Somebody I'm reading quite often now, as Gary Vee says, don't create content alone. Document the process. People want to consume the process. Just imagine you walked into a movie, and they say, who killed the victim? You're watching Special Victims Unit, Law and Order. And in 30 seconds they say, she was killed by terrorists. What's the point? But how many of you watch these series? Suits, Game of Thrones, all those various things. You watch the process. You watch how it happens. You don't even want to know the outcome, because if the outcome ends, the series ends. You want it to go on. I mean, I watched that series till I lost my mind, How I Met Your Mother. They never met the mother. I watched 6 seasons to figure that out, and then I gave up. I'm like, there's no mother in this thing. I think there was eventually at some point, but I was bored by that point. Super entertaining, but it's documenting and learning the process. In academia, you are the most respected powerhouses of information. If you say, Professor X or Person X of this institution said so, who challenges it? They can challenge it, will they? But if you put out the best possible content or document the process of your investigation, it'll be phenomenal. Yesterday I sat here and I was heartbroken when we heard such phenomenal sessions, so many presentations. 2 people gave feedback. Where's the videos? Where's the podcasts? Where's the papers? Where's the tweets? Where's the content? Where's the hashtag? Because when I walked in the Harvard Center on Tuesday, and Yuvan Naidu was presenting, he said 2 things first. Make sure you get my email. Make sure you get my account. He put his Twitter handle. And you know what Harvard did? They said, follow us at Harvard Africa, hashtag Harvard Africa. It is accepted economy, so they can follow your thinking. Whether it be on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or anything. People are consuming content anytime, every time, irrelevant of the format that they're using. Some examples of Prof. Schiller very quickly, of Yale. We all know, or a lot of our colleagues will know him as the Nobel laureate in terms of economics 2013. Amazing mind, amazing expert in his domain. A Nobel laureate would say, I don't need to publish. I got the prize. Game over. No. He says finance is the biggest part of any institution, for-profit and non-profit institutions, governments, etc. If you understand finance, you can make a big impact on the world. It helped me, because I sit in those boardrooms now. And I talk like a fundi on the topic, because I know what Basel 1, 2, and 3 is. And I know what it happens, and how the recession happens, how the economics moves, and how things flow, because this was his detail. Efficient markets, behavioral finance, monetary policies, critical elements. And I can sit and have conversations with people who have senior degrees in their fields, because I learned exactly what I needed to learn from one of the best minds in the world. I even got a certificate from Yale for doing it, and it cost me a whole $50. Documented and certified today, accessible. I did that 3 years ago, I think, so I've had some time. I think it's been updated. Curate content for increased reach. Other institutions are doing it. Instagram. 237,000 followers. They have something called a takeover process with all of their courses. You join their master's program or any other program. They hand over the account to one student for a day. Show us your view of what you think is going on campus. If you were the institution, would you firstly do it? But in South Africa, there's so many processes and documents and regulatory things to do. Harvard gives it to a student and say, run it for us. But how many of you, as users of the institution, would then share your perspective? Photographs, the pictures we took last night, the conversations we had last night, the things we shared, the photos of my baby that we showed yesterday. Things that matter to you, would you want to show? And pictures and things that you want to curate and share. You will share your view. I mean, now if you looked at that academically, where's the value? It's a picture of a person on the back with a back. But it documents their journey. That, I think, is the dean of Harvard Business School. But it documents what they saw in their view that was relevant. And people will consume it. Share the best you can. Share all you can. Because people want to consume anyway. Because reality is, in terms of content, more than 60% of video content is consumed by mobile phones currently. Facebook videos, Instagram videos, Instagram stories. Oh my God, I can do a social media class for you guys. But the content is there anyway. I've got a nephew now studying financial accounting with an esteemed institution internationally. And he said, Terrence, I'm struggling. And kid said, go YouTube it. He's got all the lectures he wants online on YouTube. He doesn't need a lecturer. But in terms of the content, more than 60% is being consumed. They say, but I think it's 2019, more than 80% of video content will be consumed on mobile. Which is true. The second largest search engine in the world is YouTube. If you're not providing content where people are, who validates your expertise? How do you create value in their lives? How do you change their lives? How do you impact their lives every day? How do you make sure that they know what you know? A great friend of mine once said, and I forgot to write this in my rush to get this done, and said, not that. He said, who knows what you know? Who knows that you know what you know? Who knows that you know what you know? If they don't know, they won't use it. People need to know what you know so they can access your expertise and information. Because that is the only way you're going to start engaging. And in terms of my catchphrase that I made more than 20 years ago, and I hope one day it actually becomes true, follow not the path of others, but make your own so that others may see and follow. Because that's how we change the world.